Hi all, I am Dr. Aruna. On behalf of Diversity Dialogues, I am on live to discuss the issues of domestic violence. So 1 week ago, we launched a guide on domestic violence with the intention of creating awareness on the growing concern of domestic violence, and we mentioned what is the role of proactive role of organizations in mitigating it. So, my role specifically in creating that guide was focusing on defining the concept of domestic violence. So why it is required? Because there are a lot of ambiguity that exists in the concept of domestic violence. Like, what constitute abusive behavior, what doesn't constitute abusive behavior, and who is a victim, who is not a victim. There are a lot of confusion that exists in this concept. So if you the people who have read this, those who have downloaded, you must already be knowing that it's a comprehensive collection of practical thoughts on domestic violence, and we have touched on a lot of aspects like legal aspects, business case, and even we have talked about what an organization should be doing for mitigating the impact of domestic violence in the workplace. And even we have mentioned how to approach a victim if you encounter a domestic violence situation, and if it has spilled over in the organization, how to approach them, and what is the sentence you should be using, and how to intervene without hurting them. So we have mentioned comprehensively how to deal with this situation. So if you haven't downloaded, it is available for free. Please download. We have mentioned the link for the free download in the previous post. Please go ahead and do it, and that is the least bit which we can do to create awareness among ourselves about the issue of domestic violence. So now we are going to talk about the topic which I have chosen to deal with it today. So the thing is, I am somebody who have done a lot of researches in the area of victimization, and being a scholar in the area of victimization, what I have understood is victim are victim because they are not really aware that they are going through abuse. So that means victims are not aware most of the time that they are not really, they're getting abused. So why is it so? Because what are the odds of happening? So we must be thinking we will be able to know if somebody is actually abusing us, but that is not really the case all the time. What are the odds of happening? Why the victim is not really knowing that it is an abuse? Let's deal with that topic right now. So if I'm asking, have you seen any victim, or have you seen any, a battered woman, or have you do you know any personal cases of dowry death, or have you seen somebody a father assaulting a child? Have you seen something? Because we have heard about it, and it is a very, very common thing that happens everywhere, but somehow we feel that it happens in some other world, right? But if I'm asking some other question, have you seen a wife nagging a husband, a wife blackmailing a husband utilizing women's wife's credit card, or a father verbally attacking a child, then forging somebody's signature for getting loan? These are all if you look at it, if you understand the legality of domestic violence, this all comes under abusive behavior. So why people are not really understanding this is abuse? See, when I'm telling all these things, blackmailing, forging signature, we know that it is bad, we know that it is abuse, but when it happens to you, you somewhat you don't really realize it is happening to you. What is happening to you is abuse. Why? Because there is a thin line between what you see as a socially acceptable behavior and abusive behavior. See, when I say socially acceptable behavior, I'm not saying it's a good behavior, all right? It is just accepted as a norm. It's a kind of a social norm. It is not really good for human being, but still we have accepted. Say, for example, because of the patriarchy, we have understood it is very common that husbands sometimes do not allow wives to go for job, right? And it is very, very common common to see a nagging wife, because we have seen a lot of WhatsApp forward jokes also, where the wife nags husband, right, and husband is scared of wife. So even though, apart from all the jokes, actually if it is happening for real, it is actually amount to abuse. and people don't really understand that they are getting abused most of the time, because there is a thin line. They are not understanding when this normal behavior or apparently uncomfortable normal behavior, when this gets close to the abusive behavior, and most of the time, and this is not really clear for the victim, and this is definitely an advantage for the perpetrator. What do you mean by the perpetrator? The one who actually abused. So it is an advantage for the abuser. They think like, they will be able to justify it. It is very, by saying that it is very common, they continue to abuse the people, right? So now we will look at it. What are the different types of abusive behavior? So see, the majorly, or everybody know, or outrightly we can say it is abuse is physical and sexual abuse, because it leaves bruise, and injuries will be an evidence, and there are a lot of people who witness it. Physical abuse is basically somebody physically attacking, attempting to murder, and injuring the partner. So these are all physical abuse. Sexual abuse would be forcing somebody to have sex and inappropriate sexual behavior. This all comes under physical and sexual abuse, and we will have physical evidence most often. And most often it will be like, and it is majorly like, everybody know that it is an abuse. There is no confusion. It is definitely outrightly identified as abuse. Now, apart from this physical and sexual abuse, what are the other types of abuses? Verbal abuse. So instead of physically attacking, threatening that you will attack that person. That is verbal abuse, right? Humiliating and yelling, shouting. Even the silent treatment is also considered as verbal abuse. So not speaking to the partner, avoiding completely. These are all verbal abuse. Now, apart from the verbal abuse, what we have is emotional abuse. So emotional abuse is, when this happens like gaslighting. Gaslighting is, it's an event that, that create a kind of a doubt in the victim. So how do you do that is by creating doubts in the women, or in see, I myself is saying women, but it can happen to anybody. So it's like gaslighting is a result of emotional abuse, and it results in low self-esteem, and it makes the victim feel that they are worthless. And how they are doing is negating that the abuse has already happened, by saying that it is your fault and it is your thought, that you actually misinterpret whatever I speak. So victim already confused, they even get confused further. So this is what we call as emotional abuse. So now we have talked about physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, then emotional abuse. Then we talk about financial abuse. Financial abuse is husband using wife's credit card, or wife using husband's credit card, or forging signature of a father, and manipulating people to for the money. These are all financial abuse. So say using a credit card of a husband and wife, somewhat it looks acceptable, right? So what is like, how do you understand that it is an abuse? I think the victim should be the judge of it. So if the victim or the person who is involved in it finds it uncomfortable to share their ATM card or credit card, then you should understand that it is an abusive behavior, and you should be encountering the person who is taking your credit card, and if they are not really able to accept it in the right sense, maybe you should understand it's a red flag. So apart from the financial abuse, we have social abuse. Social abuse is like public humiliation, and not allowing the person to go for a job, and withholding the right to go for the job and peaceful work life, and isolating them from the relationship, family and friends. These are all social abuse, because social image is tarnished. So then apart from then all these abuses, there is something which is very, very uncommonly identified as abuse, which is spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is like, your beliefs are, ridiculed, right? Somebody ridiculing your religious belief, or they are imposing their religious belief onto you, mocking your religion, and if it is hard for you, then it is a spiritual abuse. So there are a lot of wide spectrum. If you look at the abusive behavior, you will find out around 30-40 behaviors which can be considered as abusive behavior. And unless we create that awareness, we will not be able to understand whether we are getting abused or not. And the severity, sometimes there are certain behaviors. Say for example, like I said, using credit card of the husband, even if it looks normal to you, and if it is finding it if you find it uncomfortable, maybe it falls under abuse. So you should be the judge. The victim should be the judge to understand whether you are getting abused or not. Now, what happens now here is like the next possible, automatically people start judging, which one is more painful, which one is more ruthless, and it will be yes, obvious answer would be the physical and sexual abuse. But what I would like to say is, let's not do that, because it's my sincere submission not to ridicule anybody's pain as negligible or minimal, or by saying that okay, physical abuse is the most severe and the most painful. We cannot come up we cannot come up with such conclusion, because somewhat it invalidates the feeling or invalidates the pain of the victim, invalidate the feelings of the victim. See, victim is already confused, and especially because the society confuses them by saying that it is just normal behavior. So when you say that it's the physical abuse or the sexual abuse is the most severe one, and when you're ridiculing the verbal and emotional abuse, quite a lot of people are actually stuck in a toxic relationship, not knowing how to exit from that relationship. And it is not really required to understand, it is not really required to judge if it is painful or not. In fact, for a victim, every pain is hard and every type of abuse is really hard. It is better to have little bit of acceptance when a victim comes up with their own pain, and it is our responsibility to accept them, and it is our responsibility to help them to rescue themselves from that toxic situation. That should be our role, rather than understanding or judging the situation by doing a kind of a surgery to understand who's wrong, what is wrong, where it is wrong, where it is difficult. So we are not a judge of that particular situation, and it is about the victim. And if the victim feels it is hard, it is hard. Now, the next possible question is why people do not really leave this painful relationship. So the obvious reason is there is an element of emotionality in this. Okay, so when you talk about domestic violence, it happens in the four walls of home. That means it happens inside the house, and people are supposed to feel safe, right? And there it is happening. So there is an element of emotionality, because it comes from your own family members. And sometimes so you get confused because of that also. And there is a mix of social, psychological, cultural reasons for that, because people are somewhat related to the people. People are somewhat attached to the person who is abusing. So it makes it even more difficult to exit. Second thing, they're not really clear how to exit. They are clueless about exiting the situation, how to exit, because fear is governing them most of the time. So that also creates a lot of problem, right? And apart from that, if you look at it, they're not really clueless about whether it is abuse or not, like I was mentioning before. So then another major problem what I found is there is a myth associated with abuse, which is this abuse happens only to uneducated, unprivileged women. That is another problem that happens over here. And so when it happens to somebody like a educated woman, or it happens to a man, people tend to ignore it, or people tend to find it it is not really important, or they don't take it, they don't accept it. So these are the issues that affects why people are not able to leave that toxic relationship. Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about today. So I wanted to touch upon what is domestic violence, what are the various dimensions of domestic violence, what are the different types of domestic violence, and how to why people are not really exiting from this, and what, as a responsible citizen and as a part of a responsible person of a society, what can we do towards that, is what I wanted to touch upon. And I'm very happy that you could join, and I hope you find it insightful. Thank you so much for your time.